All Speeds is the Intamin multi-launch coaster at Sunac Chengdu. Does this ride look familiar? It is actually a near clone of Taron at Phantasialand in Germany, one of the most highly praised coasters in the world for its world-class theming combined with the powerful forces of an Intamin thrill coaster. As such, enthusiasts' expectations for All Speeds were high as it was being built. However, it has been SBNO since October 2025, only 3 years after it opened. I had the fortunate opportunity to ride it in June 2025. So, is it as good as the coaster it cloned? Find out in this review. In 2016, Phantasialand in Germany opened Taron to glowing reviews. Riders noted how detailed the theming was surrounding the coaster, as it came with an all-new land called Klugheim. And unlike most rides themed to this level, Taron has the strong forces that come with Intamin's launched coasters. As someone who doesn't really care that much about theming, I wasn't as hyped as others. So when I found out I would be going to Chengdu to ride All Speeds, I was intrigued, but not as excited as I would be for something like Dinoconda. I haven't ridden Taron, and I wanted to see if this layout could be elite on its own. Footage of All Speeds is extremely hard to come by. Since it hasn't been open for long and is in China where few Western enthusiasts get to, there isn't much footage on YouTube. Even on Chinese sites, I found very little off-ride footage. I also don't have any footage of my own, since when I went there, I hadn't thought of the idea of starting this channel. And it is now too late for me to go back and film, since the ride is now SBNO. As such, I will be using footage of Taron in this review, due to how little I found of All Speeds. Sunakland Chengdu is pretty far from the city center, and that is painfully apparent in the crowd levels. When I got there, the park was just about to open for the day, and there were maybe 3 or 4 people besides me waiting outside. Once I was inside, it was no different. I often found myself on spacious pathways and there would be no other park guests as far as the eye could see. Operators stationed at ride entrances were on their phones because no one was queuing up for the rides. And when I went to get the other credits at the park, I was the only one on the train. I have been to some quiet parks before, but none were as dead as this one. Like Taron, All Speeds has some pretty good theming. There is lots of rock work on top of and around the coaster, which creates many head choppers throughout the ride. The front of the train also looks like an angry bull with horns and red glowing eyes. From my experience, lines on All Speed were non-existent, which shouldn't come as a surprise after I mentioned how dead the park was. In fact, operators were waiting several minutes in an attempt to fill up the train. The most people on any of my rides were only enough to fill up the train halfway. On my last 2 rides, I was the only one on the train, and they even let me ride again because nobody else showed up. All Speeds has the same trains that you'll find on many of Intamin's other newer launched coasters, such as Taron or Velocicoaster. It has Intamin's new overhead lap bar restraint, which I find incredibly comfortable and freeing, as they leave your upper body free to be thrashed around on snappy transitions. And trust me, this ride has some very aggressive directional changes that will cause your body to be folded over the side of the train. Once you leave the station, you go through a slow turn before hitting the first launch. It uses LSMs, or linear synchronous motors, and I love the sound these make. The high-pitched whine combined with the fearsome roar is music to my ears. This launch is also quite intense, as you are forcefully held into the seat back. It's one of the punchier LSM launches I've experienced. Then, you rise up into an overbanked turn. The entry and exit have good positive Gs, but the turn itself doesn't really have much force. However, the following airtime hill is great. It gives the entire train good sustained ejector airtime. It is stronger up front, but slightly more sustained in the back. After that, you go into a forceful low-to-the-ground turn. The following transition is very snappy, with a potent combination of ejector airtime and powerful laterals folding you over the side. At this point, the ride dies down a bit. A long right turn leads into a few S-bends, which don't really do anything. Then, there is another right-hand turn, which exits into something resembling a stangle dive. This gives a weak pop of sideways airtime. Then you have a mild turn to the left, which goes into some S-bends, giving some weak lateral jolts. After that, you dive down to the left, giving some decent positive Gs as you level out. This leads into the second launch. Like the first launch, this one is very intense. Since you are surrounded by rock work on all sides, you can really feel this ride's sense of speed up front. The following ascent has some good positive Gs. However, you really slow down to a crawl at the top. Even Taron doesn't look anywhere near this slow. The following two transitions are taken so slowly that you even get some lateral hang time on them because of the high banking. The third transition is better though. You actually have some pretty good whip. Then, you go into a forceful overbank, which leads into another very snappy transition that has more powerful laterals and ejector airtime. After another forceful turn, you go into yet another super snappy transition, this time in the opposite direction. Then, after another forceful turn, you go into another transition, which isn't as snappy as the ones before, but still pretty good. Once again, the end of the ride fizzles out a bit. You go into another kind of forceful turn, which leads straight into some trim brakes, which will noticeably slow the train down. As a result, the following bunny hill only gives a decent burst of floater airtime up front, and some very weak sustained floater airtime on the subsequent drop in the back. Then, you go into one last decently forceful turn before hitting the brake run and returning to the station, ending the 1,320 meter or 4,331 foot long coaster. Overall, All Speeds is a good but somewhat flawed roller coaster. It has some very intense moments, particularly the direction changes. The ride is also very comfortable because of the Intamin lap bars and there only being a slight vibration throughout. It might not be quite as well themed as Taron, but it is still pretty good in that department. However, the ride's biggest flaw is pacing. There are points where you are just meandering, such as the end of each half and the high turns after the second launch. I never rode it with more than a half-empty train, and I was only there in the morning, so it's possible it was not running at its fastest when I rode it. But I've also heard of this being an issue on Taron, which sees much higher crowds than All Speeds, so I don't think that changes anything about my critique. The forces are pretty consistent throughout the train, although the front does have a better sense of speed, making it my preferred seat on this coaster. So, what would I rate All Speeds? I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Even though I have not ridden Taron, I still believe I would prefer it over All Speeds slightly. But despite its flaws, All Speeds is still a good launched coaster, and I do hope it reopens sometime in the future. So, what are your thoughts on All Speeds? Have you ridden it? How does it compare to Taron? Do you hope it reopens? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this coaster review, and I would be very grateful if you subscribed, because more videos will be coming soon. Thanks for watching.